and welcome to Talk of Hope, a podcast for people affected by lung cancer. I'm Rachel Avery.
And I'm Mandy Lucas.
Each episode we'll hear from people with different experiences of lung cancer, as well as healthcare professionals who will share what's going on to improve the diagnosis and treatment of this disease.
And as someone who's had lung cancer, I know exactly how terrifying it can be. But amongst all that fear and anxiety, there is also hope, and that is what we are choosing to focus on here.
Today's episode is something deeply personal, and something that so many families affected by lung cancer will recognise. The way it can shape not just one life, but generations. Our guest is Zoe Churchill, whose experience of lung cancer spans both survival and loss. Zoe was diagnosed herself and has since been successfully treated. But her story didn't start there, because she also lost her mum to the same disease. Today we'll explore what it means to face lung cancer from both sides, as a person navigating diagnosis and recovery, and as a daughter coping with grief, fear, the emotional impact of losing a parent, and where Zoe tries to see hope. Hi Zoe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on today. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you. Now, as I said in that introduction, it's quite an experience you've had, both, extremely traumatic, losing your mum, and then having your own diagnosis that was successfully treated. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your mum's experience?
Yes, so my mum was diagnosed with non-smokers EGFR lung cancer, and it was actually during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a huge delay in her diagnosis as a result. And even as a family, we felt she was suffering from long COVID. So there was quite a delay from diagnosis until from her initially seeing the GP through to the diagnosis, which ended up meaning that she was diagnosed very sadly at stage 3, but within a month was stage 4, non-curable cancer. And so, we had the double whammy of having to go through COVID and then also lung cancer as well, within the family, which was very, very hard. And as I said, it did mean that her diagnosis was severely impacted as a result. And I think that's probably quite similar for a lot of people who were diagnosed during the pandemic. There was even sort of suggestions that she might have developed asthma. One suggestion was that she might have inhaled a green pea. That was the most random one on an X-ray, but I guess they didn't believe, she'd never smoked in her life. She was fit and healthy. So the last thought of anyone was that this was potentially lung cancer. And I know that's something families have heard again and again.
It is, and it's something that we hear far too often.
Yeah.
And it's something that, as a charity, it's one of our main key messages to get out there, that lung cancer, we just need to stop thinking about it in terms of smoking or non-smoking.
100%.
It's just a cancer that affects anyone like any other type of cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's for exactly those reasons. Given you had the added complication of COVID, and obviously COVID was devastating in lots of ways, including kind of on people with lung cancer and slowing down diagnosis. But even outside of COVID, these misconceptions, these stereotypes, these assumptions, they are just slowing everything down and affecting people in different ways. People that have smoked and people that haven't. People that haven't smoked often face, much more frequent visits to the GP. They're not sent for tests as quickly. And then likewise, people who have smoked, you've got all the psychological baggage of feeling ashamed and feeling guilty and not thinking you deserve that help. So, time and time again, we say it so many times, don't we, Mandy, that we just need to stop thinking about it in these terms.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that we've done quite a few campaigns talking about this, is if you have lungs, you can get lung cancer. Nothing else really matters. It's really hard to get through, and not just, everybody. I think everybody has a problem not saying, when I was diagnosed, which was 9 years ago, I developed a script which said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, I've had lung cancer, but I've never smoked." It came out in one long line because I had to justify myself, and that you shouldn't have to do that whether you smoked or not. So it's really important that people start realizing that if you have lungs, you can get lung cancer, and it's that simple.
And
So
that's
you're
why
right.
I was so, pleased that you've come on and shared this story, because the more we keep telling people, the more stories we keep sharing, the more evidence that we have to prove that that's the case, then, ultimately that can only be a positive thing.
Exactly.
So obviously your mum is diagnosed, and you're navigating kind of this brand new world. How did this then lead in to your own diagnosis?
So it was actually during mum's treatment. Mum was only unwell for a year and a half, and then she very sadly passed. It was quite quick. We were hoping for like a 5-year managed situation, but she didn't respond to treatment very well. So it ended up being a lot faster than we'd expected. But I was then, like, my shadow, as they first called it, was found 8 months after mum was diagnosed. But I mean, it's even weird saying that now, because at the time, A, we had so much going on with mum as a family, like we couldn't think about that. But B, it was very unclear when my situation was first found if it would ever develop or what it was. Um,
Was it
it's
a
a total.
routine? Sorry, Zoe, was it a routine scan or did you have
Uh,
symptoms?
Absolutely not. So genuinely, I do feel I am the unlucky but lucky person, most lucky person in the world, because essentially I was like on my uni leavers trip with friends down in Cornwall, and I stood up on a beach. It was this random, and my whole like left side just went out. I think I was very, very stressed at the time, so I had lots of like muscle issues. And my mother's sister actually has multiple sclerosis, and I had total numbness throughout my whole left side of my body for like 2 weeks. This wouldn't go. So I saw a neurologist, and they gave me an MRI just to be careful to rule out that it wasn't MS. And the MRI picked up on my pinched nerve that was causing all the numbness. So thank goodness that was all okay. But then they saw this shadow in my lung. And I mean, at this point, like, it's incredible. Technology obviously is amazing, but it was, like 5 millimeters, 6 millimeter shadow. It was nothing. And then I immediately just got referred to my mum's lung cancer specialist. And again, I was told, this is going to be nothing, don't worry. It's probably COVID scarring, or like scarring from a cold. So then I've just been on like a wait and watch protocol effectively. And then in last summer in June, I had another routine scan, and they just felt it was changing a bit. It had grown a little bit, and the components were becoming a bit more solid. And because of mum's diagnosis and her EGFR mutation, I was on a very low surgery threshold. So I went ahead and had the surgery last August, and it was the earliest possible stage of lung cancer, but it was a confirmed tumour, and it was also EGFR mutated, like mum's. But I mean, we'll get into this maybe later, but not the same EGFR mutations. I actually had 2 mutations, and they were totally different to mum's, which means that it wasn't hereditary. But it makes no sense either way how it couldn't be hereditary. Anyway, that's an area of research that I guess is still open.
Rachel, I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm thinking like I'm talking to myself here.
I did say this was going to be like a mirrored conversation
I
between
actually
you
got
two.
goosebumps. Your story is so similar to mine. There are some differences,
Yeah.
but in terms of the timescales, I even had my first operation in the August. I feel like I'm talking to myself, a very
Wow.
young
Well, I
version.
haven't met anyone else, because I guess I haven't been part of this community for very long, and with my age as well, it's like a little bit of a hard
Absolutely.
community to enter into. So it's really good to talk to someone who I know has actually lived this as well, because I've not met anyone who's even had the operation.
All of it. I've lived all of what you said. So yeah, maybe I'll try not to talk too much about me because I'm pretty sure our listeners have heard enough about me. But I'll chip in when I can, and obviously we can talk afterwards if we want to, because yeah, it's fascinating, not in a good way. But yeah, wow, there's so much to unpack there, isn't there, in terms of what you went through in a short amount of time, and I really do get it because that was my story too. I don't know where to start really, Rachel. I'm kind of a bit kind of blown away that you're so similar
Well,
to me.
your mum, like Zoe, had her diagnosis first, and
Yeah.
again, like, well, I suppose
There's lots of differences. My mum was a smoker.
Yeah, and yours was caught by accident, but not in the same way that Zoe's was kind of caught by accident. You were being,
No.
well, I suppose, you were being treated for something else, and Zoe was
Yeah,
under
yeah,
suspicion for
exactly.
something else, and it
Yeah, so
just
my
happened
mum,
to catch
exactly.
the bottom of your lung, didn't it?
Again. Yeah. So my mum was diagnosed, she was a smoker and she was diagnosed at stage 4. And during the time that she was ill and getting worse, I had pancreatitis. I'm not going to go too much detail. I went into hospital, had my treatment, came out. 6 months later, they wanted to scan me to make sure there wasn't anything more sinister going on. They didn't think so, but 6 months was a good time. I went in, it was all fine, but they found a nodule on my lung, which I had no idea was there, no symptoms at all. And I was on a watch and wait for a year and then went back and it had grown. So, a very similar story to yours. Mine got slightly more complicated, and that's because my mum was a smoker and we don't know, I don't even know if she had the mutation testing. This was back in 2015, so
Okay.
a decade ago. I don't think she did. So I wasn't under my mum's surgeon because my mum lives in a completely different place to me. So mine got very complicated around the diagnosis and having that taken out. And I won't say any more about that. We can discuss that maybe later. Um, but yeah, all very similar. Unfortunately, mine was stage 3. So I had to have lots of chemo, 2 surgeries, blah, blah, blah. But here I am 9 years later. Absolutely fine. Discharged from my surgeon. Absolutely fine. So yeah, it's
That's
fascinating.
amazing.
And it's really, really hard to go through. So yeah, let's talk more about you, not me.
I think something I'd like to kind of ask both of you is on an emotional level, to be diagnosed with the disease that ultimately killed your mothers. I don't even know how you start to get your head around that. Because we talk about survivor's guilt anyway. Like if you're diagnosed early, sometimes you do experience that survivor's guilt, especially when you see other people within the lung cancer community passing away, and you think, why them, why not? Why was I the lucky one? But when that person is your mum, that it's just unfathomable, really.
And I feel like with all things grief, it's like such a continuous process. So, I mean, how I feel one day about it might be different to how I feel the next day. But I mean, ultimately, my feelings are like, how lucky am I that my outcome was so positive? And it's just absolutely awful that mums were so negative. But like one good thing has come from this, which is that because of mum, they were so cautious with me and they were so cautious with their threshold for surgery, which they would not have been otherwise. I would still have this in me right now, and they would be saying, oh, still unsure. Even before the operation, we were hoping it was just I can't remember the term for it, but we were hoping it was precancerous, not cancerous. And so they really couldn't tell from the scans what it was. And it could very much still be in me right now. And actually, they said to me, like, right, you should really consider having the surgery. But they didn't give me an exact time frame for that. They said, like, within the next 6 months to a year, you should look at it. Anyway, so that was last June, and I live in Jordan in the Middle East. So I came back to Jordan, continued about my daily life, and then I kept thinking, like, it was just consuming my thoughts. I was like, what would my mother be saying? Like, what would mum be telling me? And she would be saying, for goodness sake, get it out. You have the opportunity now. Get it out while you still, like, while you can. And then obviously I, came home, went through the surgery. It was an incredibly hard time, but it was like my surgeon literally said, he said, you'll be the only person this year who I operate on who will have their tumor removed at this early stage. And I don't need any chemo. I obviously have my follow-up scans now, but I didn't need treatment ultimately, and that would have changed my life. I was 26 last summer, I'm now 27, but that would have changed the whole course of my life if I had to go through chemo at that sort of age.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And what you talk about is a struggle that I had. So because it was 10 years ago and they knew my mum had died of lung cancer, what I found out after that was I knew my grandma had died of lung cancer, but my great grandma died of lung cancer too. But they weren't really interested in that either. They just said, we don't know what it is. We think it's scarring. Go away, come back in a year. A year's time it had grown, and then they would not take it out. I had to battle for 18 months to get them to take it out, like beg them to take it out. And even when they took it out, the surgeon came to see me while I was recovering and saying, it's nothing. It was tiny. It was 6.7 millimeters at the point they took it out,
wow.
but it was
Yeah,
already
that's similar.
stage 3. But when he'd seen it and taken it out, he said it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Come back in 3 weeks for the check for the, I can give you your results, but it's absolutely nothing. And obviously walk back in 3 weeks' time for them to say it's stage 3, you have to start chemo tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's
I didn't realize it
fascinating.
could be stage 3 if it was so small, because mine
Neither
was
did
like
anybody
8
else.
millimeters, and I
Yeah,
didn't,
nobody did.
my lymph nodes were tested, but that's, gosh.
Did you have open surgery or keyhole?
I had the robotic,
Good, that's brilliant. I
which
had to have
was,
open.
yeah, I was very lucky that my
Very good.
surgeon and the hospital had that equipment, because
It's
the
amazing.
recovery was so, I mean, it was not nice either way, but it was a lot better than what it could have been.
Yeah. And that's amazing. Like, I just feel like your your story is my story, but a decade later, and all the improvements they've made to that process is so encouraging. It's so brilliant to hear, Zoe. It makes my heart happy.
The way we treat lung cancer is constantly changing and improving. Now, around 10 to 15% of people who have surgery undergo robotic assisted surgery, like Zoe. Find out more about this minimally invasive approach to surgery on the Roy Castle website.
The emotion of it, you're right. I mean, I spent quite a lot of time being angry at my mum because I felt like she'd given me lung cancer because she was a smoker. All of my life, she smoked.
Okay.
So we spent quite a long time being angry with her. And obviously, she died. So she knew I had something there. So she obviously felt very guilty about that as well. And then I went through all the grief and the guilt of her dying, which I didn't have time to process really until I went back and found out mine had grown. So you're right, the emotions. Now I don't blame my mum at all. I wish she was
Yeah.
here to tell her that it's not her fault. It is definitely, it's never been proven, but the facts speak for themselves. It's hereditary, and like yours is probably, like you say, it's
I mean,
impossible to think that it can't be.
that's been one of the hardest things, is like getting my head around the fact that I haven't been told a reason for this, and mum never got told a reason either. And I have come to terms with it, but it does play on my mind a bit, like, how, why
Why
is there no
me?
more research on this? Why is no one interested?
I think it's a really valid point, and I think that's why when someone says they have lung cancer, the first question out of people's mouths is, "Did you smoke?" And it's not meant to be malicious or judgmental. It's to help people understand if they've smoked and they get lung cancer. I understand that there's a
Yeah,
reason, there's a cause, there's a risk factor there.
100%.
to remove that risk factor is very scary, because all of a sudden it means, well, if it can happen to you, that means it can happen to me. And all of a sudden, people get very, very nervous and uncomfortable about that. And I always remember one of the first advocates I interviewed, a guy called Tom. He was the one that said that to me, and it's stuck with me ever since, because we talk a lot about, we hate that first question. We hate that kind of almost like a reflex of, I have lung cancer, did you smoke? And it comes out just almost like automatically. And he said, well, no, I don't take it like that. I take it that people are it's like kind of self-preservation, self-protection. If they can explain why it's happened, then there's safety in that. But it must be,
it's totally that, yeah. And even when I say my story, I don't feel like, one slight frustration is, I live in the Middle East. People are smoking all around me the whole time. And I am looking at them like, I'm pretty relaxed, I believe everyone can do what they want with their own body, and that's totally fine. But I do sometimes look at other young people, especially really close friends, who are smoking, and I'm like, you've seen what I went through. You know what this can actually do. Like, what are you doing? But I get it. It's their choice, and I don't feel, it doesn't upset me. I find it baffling. I'm like, what more evidence do you need to realize, like, I'm not like, this isn't, why not me? Why not you? Like, why not anyone? This could happen.
Yeah, I mean, and we've just had the recent agreement about the tobacco and vaping bill. So I think it's anyone born, is it 2009, can now no longer, will never ever be able to buy cigarettes or vape products, to hopefully create this smoke-free generation, and really reduce kind of the risk factors, which is, again, really fantastic. But we do need to start understanding and looking beyond smoking now, because so many people are being diagnosed that don't have that in their medical history. They don't have a history of smoking. And because lung cancer has been so underfunded for so long, the other risk factors are just not really known. So those reasons why things could happen. I mean, I know there's been a study about EGFR mutation, which I know, Zoe, both you and your mum had, looking at kind of air pollution, because air pollution triggers the EGFR mutation. So obviously that's a step forward. But we're finding things out about diet. Diet is having an impact. Wood burning stoves,
I've heard
fires, all of this. So we have to understand all these other environmental factors, and absolutely we have to look at family history, because so far, and I spoke to our researchers about this, there is no evidence to say lung cancer is hereditary.
No,
absolutely right.
I've got two people in front of me that are multiple generations. The man I spoke about just now, Tom, he was third or fourth line in his family. So, there are patterns, and I know it's of great worry to a lot of people whose parents or grandparents they've lost, asking that question of, well, am I more at risk if they've had it?
And there's no screening. Like, that's the biggest problem.
At the moment, the screening parameters don't include kind of a family history.
So even
hopefully it might do in the future.
My siblings were obviously very concerned after I had my diagnosis as well as mums. And in the end, like, we paid for them to privately get a one-time screening to put all of our minds at rest.
You have to pay those,
that's crazy that even had to happen, and that an exception couldn't be made for a generation of, and also given how young mum was in her diagnosis, and then she passed at 52. I was 22 when it was first found and diagnosed at 26. Like, it's crazy that they wouldn't offer my siblings, who have potentially the exact same problem. Thankfully, their scans were all clear, but like, we had to go through private screening.
Yeah. And, it's even if it's not understood to be hereditary yet, it goes kind of beyond that kind of genetic side of it, because if you're in a family in the same environment,
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
that could be the fact. It could be that you were living in a highly polluted
Yeah.
area, or you've had exposure to radon that you weren't aware of, or all these other things that we know are factors.
I mean, the hilarious thing was I grew up in the countryside, so like there's no pollution
There is
anywhere, and no
there's no
smokers
rhyme
in
or
my
reason.
family. But like whatever, we've got to
Crazy.
keep looking into whatever causes there are.
Yeah. I remember when I was diagnosed and told them about my family history, and kind of it was just given a cursory, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, don't you want to know a bit more about it? Why aren't you interested that I am the fourth generation to have
Yeah.
this? And it was so aggressive, so small and so aggressive, and would definitely have killed me because I had zero symptoms. Why aren't you interested? But I suppose for me, and perhaps for you, because my mum had already passed away, and obviously my grandma and great grandma, there was nothing, they couldn't really do any research on us because I'm the only survivor currently. So
Yeah.
that, I think that was one of the problems. But I felt like saying, you should be going, really, that's interesting. And they were like, oh yeah, okay, write it down. And I remember
No,
thinking, why aren't you interested? This should be
we
fascinating.
we did a whole mapping of mum's tumours when she was unwell. So we have all of the information of both hers and mine. We did all the genetic testing. It's just finding, one day
Somebody
we
who's
will, but
interested.
finding someone who's interested.
Absolutely. I get your frustration totally. It's just really interesting to talk to you. You're kind of like I said, a decade ahead of where I was, and how much has changed, but how much hasn't as well. I'm just so sorry you've had to go through all that. It is awful, especially at your age. That is just awful. How are you now, Zoe?
I'm doing really well now. Honestly, it has been a really hard period, and it's so funny to look back on it if I think like how I was even was 8 months ago now. Really in the moment, I was so unwell after the surgery because, I wasn't really that prepared. I just like come straight back to the UK, went in for the surgery. And my doctors were amazing, but they would have had me believed I was going in for my teeth to be cleaned.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like, so I woke up from the operation, I was like basically disabled, like I can't move. And that was a really, really big shock for someone my age. I was saying to friends at the time, I was like, I feel like I've gone in, and because I was perfectly healthy when I went in, I've never had a symptom in my life. So I felt like I was part of some clinical trial. And I just, I was wheeled out the hospital 4 days later in a wheelchair. And then it was a good 6 weeks of recovering, just recovering. And actually that was very short in comparison to people who used to have the open surgery. So I appreciate how lucky I was, but it was a huge shock for someone as fit and physically active as I was before, and independent, living in a different country to my family, to then be at home. And the thing I found really hard was a lot of my symptoms after the surgery really reminded me of mum when she was ill. So that was
That's
like one of the hardest things. Because I obviously had very tight chest and I was very hunched over for a while, and I was coughing a lot. And so I think that's what I found like the hardest was like that's one of the biggest things I remember from mum when she was ill was her cough, and the way she would stand up when she stood up when she was very ill was very hunched over and in a lot of pain. And for those 6 weeks, I was like basically launched into feeling
well,
having those symptoms.
yeah.
But obviously, I didn't have that one person that I would have liked to have been there more than anyone else in the world to support me through it. Obviously, in spirit, in spirit.
Yeah, but it's really hard. I get it. I get it. And I still have that. I lost my mum over 10 years ago, just before I found out what was going on with me. And I still miss her. I still like go to do the things I used to do 10 years ago, like get in the car. And the first thing I'd do is I'd phone my mum. If I was going out working and visiting a customer, I'd get in the car and think, right, I've got half an hour, I can phone my mum. And I still do it. I still get in the car and think, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah,
So I get it. It's the one person you really want there. It's so
yeah,
hard to come to terms with. Yeah, I know
yeah.
exactly how you feel.
Grief
Tell us,
is the
tell
hardest
us
thing.
about your mum. Tell us about your mum. Like
Yeah,
what nothing to do with lung cancer, just tell us about your mum.
who she was.
Um, well, her name was Catherine. And she grew up in the West Indies. My grandfather and my grandmother were both based out there. My grandmother was her whole family had been based out there for a long time. My grandfather worked there, and so I mean, that was a huge part of her was like this whole Caribbean upbringing. She'd never really like seen snow or cold weather until she was 16 and moved to London. So,
Mhm.
she loved being in the sun, she loved being by the sea, and she loved tropical flowers. She loved gardens in general. That was like a huge part of her life was gardens and flowers. But tropical flowers were like the best thing. And she was just the most kind and generous person. Like you really couldn't meet anyone who was just like I don't think I've ever met anyone who could ever say a bad word about her. And I know people probably say that about a lot of people after they passed away, but you really like could not meet a kinder person than my mum and a more warm person. Like nothing was ever too much to ask. I'm one of four siblings. So she was constantly running around after all of us. And you would always feel like when she was talking to you that you were the focus, you were her world, and like there was no questions about how much she loved us. And I think that was like, you can't replace a mother's love, let alone an incredible mother's love.
Yeah, absolutely. I
But it
can't
still
imagine
stays
anyone
with
else.
me. Like, I think I'm so grateful to her for giving me all that love because I genuinely still feel it every day, even though she's not here to actively give it. I do actually feel her love. And it's really changed how I want to be as a person and how I want to be as a future mother, and it's shaped me as a person.
That's fantastic.
And and as a parent myself, you would do anything for your children, and I'm sure both your mums would have wanted it this way round, that you two have benefited from earlier diagnosis, improvement in treatments, and still be here to live the life you have than
Absolutely.
the other way around. And
100%.
yeah, it's beautiful to hear you talk about your mum and to see you just
Cheers.
light up.
It's
And
nice because I'm sure everyone who's going through grief understands it, but you don't, after a while, you stop finding a way to slot them into your life and actively talk about them. You think about them, of course, every day, but you don't, it would feel a bit weird sometimes just to randomly bring up mum and talk about who she was. So I always like relish the opportunity when someone asks me about her.
That's
and I think
lovely.
it's really important to ask about her and ask about her outside of the diagnosis, because when you're diagnosed with any illness, all of a sudden that becomes part of your identity. And a lot of people don't want it to be, and they want to be thought about, talked to in the same way that they were before the diagnosis. And I always remember speaking to a couple of people, and they ask, oh, how are things with you? And there was some minor drama going on with me, and I'm like, oh, don't worry about that, I don't want to bother you with that. And they're like, no, we want to hear it. We actually want to hear about your drama. And as a person that doesn't have cancer, you feel guilty sharing what seems very inconsequential and minor compared to what they're going through. But people crave that normality. They want to still be that individual and that person
100%.
outside of a cancer
Absolutely right.
diagnosis.
And you don't want to talk about cancer the whole time. When you've got cancer, you've been diagnosed, you don't want, it feels like all of a sudden nothing else is important. Like I have friends say, oh, I've had this and that, but it's nothing like you've been through. I'm like, it's not a competition.
Yeah, literally.
Get
No.
it. Forget what I've been through. I want to know about what you're going through because I'm just a normal human being and everyone's going through stuff, aren't they? So yeah, I get that. It is quite hard to talk. I find it quite hard to talk about my mum, but I do think about her every
Yeah.
day in some situation that I'm in. I'd say think what my mum would say and what she'd make of this. And also, I
Yeah.
mean, there's no doubt she'd be proud of you, Zoe, what you've been through and how you've spoken here today. But you want her to be proud of you as well, and that's you don't get that feedback, and it's really hard. I know it. I know it's really hard.
Yeah, and just to have that person that you know will unconditionally listen to you and know you inside out and give you a good sounding board, especially when you're, still going through, I'm calling this my turbulent 20s. You go
Love
through
it.
grief, my own diagnosis, heartbreak at times, moving my whole life abroad, away from my family, starting like afresh, as it were. And so yeah, it's hard. It's really hard not having that
Yeah,
grounding force, but my sisters have really become that for me. Like we
that's
have
lovely.
supported each other exactly how mum would want us to. I know that. We speak every day, and whilst they're not mum, they are like my best friends. And
That's great to hear.
yeah, I don't know how I could do it without both of them have their different inputs, but both are equally valuable.
That's lovely.
Whether you have lung cancer or someone you love is facing a diagnosis, our nurses are here to listen, answer any questions you might have, or simply explain what might lie ahead. Call 0800 358 7200 or email lungcancerhelp@roycastle.org. Tell us what life is like now then. So you had your surgery in, was it
Last August.
last August? So
Only eight months
several
ago.
months down the
Yeah.
line.
So yeah, 7 months down the line. I mean, so life now, I actually ran 5K for the first time maybe 2 weeks ago since my surgery, which I mean, for me that was very exciting because I enjoy doing exercise and very sporty. And I'd been a bit frustrated that I hadn't felt up to running again for a while. But I ran 5K again, so that was a good target. And physically, I'm feeling fine. I've still obviously got my scars and they can be quite sore, but I have made like as good a recovery as I could ever have hoped for. The thing that I think I'm now left with is like, obviously, I'm going to have my repeated scans. So I've got my next scan in June, and it is something that crops up. And I know it's something that everyone experiences, scan anxiety. Scan anxiety, exactly. And it's also that ability to, when you aren't feeling well, but totally unrelated to the lung cancer. I had I think it was like an intercostal muscle was pulled in January. Really, really painful. And it was not fun. It was like weeks. And my first thought was, because it was in the lung region, was, oh my gosh, like this is my lung cancer has come back. And so it's really, I think it's managing that health anxiety, even though I know I need to stay calm. I'm in the system, I'm being monitored, I'm in as lucky a place as I could be. But having had a really horrible diagnosis, it does, you don't take a cold for granted. You're like, this
You
could
don't take
be.
anything for granted.
Yeah. And I found that hard. And a day not feeling well, I do get in my head a bit.
You've said it before, Mandy, you lose trust in your body a little bit,
Yeah.
don't you?
Myself. I
Actually,
had the
that's,
same thing. I had the
yeah.
same thing. I had a really bad cold a couple of weeks ago when I was coughing and coughing, and I must have pulled a muscle in my ribs. I don't know how
Yeah,
I did it. Just
exactly what happened to me.
actually from coughing, not running or exercising. But then I had this terrible pain when I breathed in my ribs, and I was saying to my husband, "I'm gonna have to go back. I mean, I'm not being monitored anymore for that. I finished." I'm like, "It's gone now. It's not. There's nothing going on at all. I'm absolutely fine. I completely forgot about it until you just said it." But I was
Yeah,
absolutely distraught because you just
no, I was on the phone to my family being like, no, I'm gonna have to go through the surgery again.
but it's completely natural. I had a lot of counselling. We talked about this in the last episode. I had a real proper health anxiety problem. And I had
Okay.
a lot of counselling, CBT and EMDR counselling, and it really helped me. It really helps contextualize what is going on and how to kind of compartmentalize things that you're going through and put things to the back of your mind, lock them up in a little box until they happen. I'm much better than I was. But even so, the minute you get any kind of, I get a headache and I think, oh my word, it's gone to my brain. Like the best hypochondriac you ever met in your life. The minute I get a headache, 'cause I don't suffer from headaches. So the minute I get one, I'm like, right, that's it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
traveled.
it.
It's in there, it's traveled. I'm going to die next week. And it's
No,
it's
I,
not at
I, I
Can I
can
all.
just
really
can
relate to
I
this.
just remind you both that this is called Talk of Hope.
Oh, sorry.
This
Yeah.
But
podcast,
it's
please.
awful because I'm making it up. I am telling myself these things when it's not actually happening. And that the health anxiety is a really hard thing to get hold of. Like I
Yeah.
really thought I had it in the bag, and then I had this thing of my rib, and I was down a rabbit hole. That was gone.
Yeah.
So I
Have
totally
you
get where you're coming from, and that's unavoidable because of what you've been through.
have you had any counselling, Zoe?
So I've done counselling a little bit on and off since mum passed away.
Yeah,
And I've gone through periods of finding it really helpful and feeling like I'm in a phase of really wanting to talk and unpack. And then I found that other times actually I would just end up trying to think of problems before the session to go to them with. So then I realized at that point, actually, best take a break. But counseling was instrumental for me last summer when I was deciding whether to go ahead with the surgery. And
brilliant.
I mean, I actually, my counselor, absolutely amazing. Like, have known her for a while now. She's worked with our family as well and done family counselling, which was so helpful after mum passed. But
Yeah,
she, I mean, she just put it all so clearly. I actually thought I was going to be considered a hypochondriac if I asked my surgeon to have the operation. I literally came out of the appointment. My amazing aunt had actually come to the appointment with me, my mum's sister, because I just said, like, I need someone else to come to these lung appointments. They're so triggering. And I came out of the appointment, I was like, well, from what it sounds like, I probably should go ahead with the surgery. But why am I feeling like that would be a massive overreaction? And then anyway, I took her and also this counsellor after I'd already flown back to Jordan to then be like, what are you doing? You have the option for a surgery now. Why are you inflicting this trauma on yourself of like delaying,
yeah.
even though you know you have to have the surgery at some point?
Why do you think you were delaying it?
Um, I didn't feel like it was justified, to be honest. I didn't, because I was told, you can have this done in 6 months, you can have it done in a year. It's
Did
so
it feel
small.
urgent, I'm
Yeah,
guessing?
it was really not made to feel urgent, and I'm sure it wasn't urgent. But I did have in my head when these things turn and they start growing, they
It's
start growing. Mum's within, oh my gosh, within like 3-4 weeks, it had doubled in size from when she had her first scans to then like her, follow-up ones. So I think it took a lot of time. Like I needed to remove myself from the situation, sit with my
yeah,
thoughts to feel actually justified
yeah,
in asking for this. But I mean, now looking back on it, I'm like, well, of course, why did I even stress about the decision? There was no decision. You needed it out. But yeah, it was like a really big thing I was grappling with for a good 3 weeks. I was like really struggling away from my family. And I was very emotional about it because it was a huge trigger with mum having passed away and, not being able to talk to her about it as well. So counselling was, sorry, very long answer, but counselling was very helpful with that because I just booked an appointment at that point when I was struggling and she gave me so much clarity. So that was helpful.
my counselor is amazing too. You have to find someone who you get
Yeah.
on with,
Yeah, you really
and
do.
then yeah. But it took a while for it to work with me. I had 8 or 9 sessions before anything clicked with me. I was going and
Yeah.
thinking, well, this isn't
That's-
really working. I'm just unpacking my childhood and
yeah.
my relationship with my mom and why I feel guilty about my mom's death and, all the thoughts, but I don't feel any better. And then at session 9, I don't know what she said or what happened, but something clicked and I was like, wow,
Light bulb moment.
it was, and
Yeah.
it changed me as a person, completely and utterly changed my personality, for the better because I get it now. I
Yeah.
can
And
see it all now. It's
I
amazing.
I think it's about having that like that protected space because we're all so busy with our lives and I don't give grief or what I've been through enough airtime, which is
Yeah,
one of the reasons why it's so lovely to be involved with Roy Castle and to speak to you guys today because I really don't give it enough airtime in my life and to have that protected time every week where right, I've got an hour to talk about how I'm doing in terms of how I'm doing as a person, but also if I want it to be grief related, cancer related, anything related, but we all need to safeguard time more.
agreed. Totally agree. It's really
Yeah.
important to talk about these things for your own sense of normality, but also I hope these podcasts help a lot of people understand that they are not alone and there is
Yeah.
definitely hope with all the hypochondria that I've talked about, and I am very guilty of that. My diagnosis was in 2015. So I'm 10, this is my 10th year and I'm doing really, really well. I don't even think about it. And I had open surgery, the full kit and caboodle, got a great big scar on my back and all the rest of it. And, that doesn't matter. That was 10 years ago, but there is hope. And even
Yeah.
if you get, my diagnosis stage 3, even with the stage 4 diagnosis, and we've spoken to a lot of people, haven't we, Rachel, with a stage 4 diagnosis who are living their lives. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so important to understand that there is hope and you're not alone. So, yeah, this has been so fascinating, Zoe. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having
Just to
me.
just to finish up, then, really on along those similar lines of hope. What are your personal hopes for the future? Both obviously having being diagnosed early and being able to get on with the life that you want to live, but also in terms of improvements for lung cancer.
So in terms of life, I mean, obviously hope to live a very healthy, happy and active life. And just continue, going from strength to strength after this operation, this like minor setback in life. I think, I hope to use that experience to shape who I am in terms of health, but also, yeah, just in general shape me as a person. Having been through such a hard time in my 20s. Uh, and then for lung cancer, I mean, I have quite a few hopes. Um, I would love to see screening for people who have a family history of lung cancer. And I think the sooner that happens, the better. I think it's totally vital. It is heartbreaking to think of people my age who might be getting diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer when it could have been avoided by one simple scan. And yeah, just much more awareness in the symptoms of early lung cancer. And then I guess support for families who are going through a difficult situation with a family member or a parent even going through treatment and having to deal with the potential loss and then later the loss of a family member.
Thank you. And yeah, like Mandy said, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, as I said at the beginning, an incredibly emotional experience. I mean, being diagnosed anyway is obviously emotional, be it early, be it late, but to do it under the circumstances which you both have is yeah, it's like Mandy said, I'm sure people will take some real hope from hearing you speak so
Yeah,
eloquently and so
absolutely.
beautifully and passionately about your mum. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story. And yeah, let's all keep talking about lung cancer because only good things can come from that.
Very much
Absolutely
so.
right.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Talk of Hope from Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation. For support and advice about any of the topics covered in this podcast, visit roycastle.org. Talk of Hope is a fortnightly podcast with new episodes released every other Tuesday. Like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.